It's a good bounce back win for us today. I thought we started the game with the right tone on the defensive end, and so that was that was by design for us to get back to our norm.
Just when you thought the drama surrounding Team USA and Caitlin Clark had finally cooled down, a massive development involving NBC has reportedly sent the coaching staff and the old guard of the WNBA into an absolute tailspin. And this time it isn't about a roster spot or a petty foul, but about who truly owns the future of the sport. We are hearing reports of a complete meltdown behind closed doors because the one thing the establishment tried so hard to prevent is happening anyway. And it is being driven by the billions of dollars that just poured into the league. They tried to keep the spotlight on the team. They tried to preach experience over hype, and they tried to humble the rookie sensation by leaving her off the Olympic plane. But this latest strategic shift from the broadcasting giant proves that you simply cannot stop a tidal wave with a chain-link fence. The narrative that the coaches and the selection committee tried to force down everyone's throats, that Caitlin Clark wasn't ready and needed to wait her turn, has just been dismantled by the people who actually signed the paychecks. If rumors are to be believed, the reaction inside the Team USA camp has been explosive because they are realizing that their gold medals might matter less to the networks than a single Caitlin Clark pregame routine. But to understand why this specific announcement has triggered such a volatile reaction, we have to peel back the layers of power dynamics that have been shifting beneath the surface of women's basketball for the last 6 months. Because this isn't just about basketball anymore. It is about a hostile takeover of the sport's hierarchy. The tension started long before this NBC revelation, going all the way back to the moment the Olympic roster was finalized, where you had head coach Cheryl Reeve and the committee insisting that this was purely a basketball decision. They claimed they needed defense, they needed chemistry, and they needed veterans who had been through the fire, which on paper sounds logical, but the reality was far messier and filled with what many fans perceived as gatekeeping. Insiders and analysts immediately pointed out that leaving the most popular female athlete on the planet at home was a marketing disaster. And NBC, who holds the broadcasting rights for the Olympics, was reportedly livid at the time because they had been banking on the Caitlin Clark effect to drive viewership numbers into the stratosphere. When she was snubbed, reports surfaced that network executives were scrambling, wondering why the league and the federation would intentionally sabotage their own ratings. But the coaches stood firm, won the gold, and likely thought that the victory would silence the critics. They thought that standing on that podium would prove them right, that the system works and that the rookie needed to learn her place. But that victory lap was short-lived because the reality of the business side of sports was about to hit them like a freight train. While the coaches were celebrating their tactical win, the networks were looking at the spreadsheets, and the numbers didn't lie. The viewership for the Olympic Games, while decent, didn't come close to the frenzy that surrounds a standard Indiana Fever regular season game. That data set the stage for this new explosion. Because now, with the new media rights deal valued at over $2 billion kicking in, NBC and the other partners are reportedly pivoting their marketing and coverage strategies to be almost entirely Clark-centric for the upcoming seasons. We are hearing whispers of dedicated camera angles, documentary-style follow-alongs, and primetime slots specifically dictated by when Clark is playing. Regardless of what the standings say or who the best team is on paper, this is a direct slap in the face to the traditional hierarchy that coaches like Reeve have spent decades building. Because in their eyes, the league should be about the best teams, not one individual, but the network is effectively saying, we paid for the superstar, and we are going to show the superstar. This shift effectively takes the power out of the coach's hands. They can bench her. They can snub her from national teams. They can try to roughen her up with physical play. But they cannot stop the cameras from turning toward her. And this loss of control is what is reportedly causing the explosion of anger. The coaches feel that their authority is being bypassed by corporate interests who care more about clicks and views than defensive schemes. But it gets even deeper when you look at the jealousy angle that has been plaguing the league. It is an ugly word, but it is the only one that fits the situation where you have veterans who have been grinding for 10 or 15 years, playing overseas in harsh conditions to make ends meet, building this league brick by brick, only to have a rookie walk in and suddenly the networks treat her like she invented the sport. When NBC signals that they are doubling down on Clark, it validates the fear that every other player is just a background character in her movie. And for the Team USA coaching staff, who pride themselves on the collective, this is a nightmare that undermines their entire philosophy. How can you tell a player to be selfless and sacrifice for the team when the media partner is rewarding the individual with massive exposure and endorsement potential? This creates a fractured locker room environment where the Clark haters feel justified in their resentment, and the Clark supporters feel like the league is finally getting the attention it deserves, leaving the coaches stuck in the middle, trying to maintain order in a world where the rules of engagement have changed overnight. The backlash isn't just about hurt feelings. It is about the fear of irrelevance. Because if the gold medal team doesn't get the headline, but the rookie who stayed home does, what is the gold medal actually worth in the open market? Let's not forget the financial aspect here, because money is always the root of the conflict. And Caitlin Clark's arrival has accelerated the charter flight conversation and pumped money into the ecosystem. Yet the distribution of that attention is lopsided. The coaches know that NBC's strategy is going to make Clark the face of the entire operation, which means endorsement deals, side projects, and media opportunities will flow toward her and her circle, potentially leaving veterans with crumbs despite their accolades. The rumor mill suggests that some high-profile figures within the Team USA setup view this NBC pivot as a betrayal of meritocracy, believing they earned primetime spots by winning. But television is not a meritocracy. It is a popularity contest. And the explosion we are hearing about is essentially the old guard realizing they cannot win a popularity contest against a phenomenon. They can win games, sure, and beat opponents by 30 points, but they cannot beat the algorithm. And that realization is terrifying for people who have spent their lives believing that winning solves everything. There is also a speculative element regarding the future of Team USA, specifically with the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles on the horizon, where NBC will be the broadcaster again. Do you think for 1 second they will allow the selection committee to leave Clark off the roster for a home soil Olympics? Absolutely not. And this current announcement and strategic shift is effectively a warning shot to the federation that says get on board or get run over. The coaches who made the decision to snub her in 2024 are likely realizing their autonomy is gone and that the network will have a heavy hand in ensuring their golden goose is front and center in LA. This realization, that they are no longer the ultimate decision makers, is likely fueling the rage, because no coach wants to be told who to play by a TV executive. But when that executive is signing a $2 billion check, the coach doesn't have much of a choice. The power dynamic has flipped. Players and coaches used to hold the leverage because they were the talent. But now the talent is a single entity named Caitlin Clark, and everyone else is just facilitating the broadcast. It is a harsh reality, and it is understandable why emotions are running high, especially when you consider the physical toll and the enforcer mentality that might stem from this. If coaches and veterans feel disrespected by the media focus, how does that translate to the court? We have already seen hard fouls like the one from Kennedy Carter and the general physicality thrown Clark's way. And this NBC news might pour gasoline on that fire, because if opposing teams feel the game is rigged in Clark's favor by the media, they might take that frustration out on her physically. It creates a dangerous cycle where the media loves her, veterans resent her, the physicality increases, and the media covers the physicality, which drives more views, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of drama. The Team USA coaches, who are supposed to be stewards of the game, are watching this turn into reality TV rather than a basketball league, and they hate it. But they are powerless to stop it because the fans are eating it up. Furthermore, consider the unrivaled league and the off-season moves where Clark has options now and doesn't necessarily need traditional structures to succeed. If the WNBA and the Team USA establishment continue to be hostile, or if coaches continue to freeze her out of the narrative, she has the leverage to take her brand elsewhere during the off-season or prioritize ventures where she is the equity holder. NBC knows this, and they want to be in the Caitlin Clark business, not just the WNBA. So if she decides to play in a new 3-on-3 league or do a series of exhibition matches, NBC would likely throw millions at the rights to air that. The Team USA coaches know that if Clark creates her own ecosystem, their leverage drops to zero. So they need her in the system to validate the system. But by snubbing her, they pushed her toward becoming an independent entity. This announcement is confirmation that she is bigger than the structure they tried to confine her in, which is a hard pill to swallow for coaches who preach that no one is bigger than the team. In 2024, that motto feels officially dead. And what about the fans? The comment sections and social media forums are having a field day with this because the general sentiment is that the coaches are getting a dose of karma. After the condescending remarks about reality from legends like Diana Taurasi, watching the network pivot to Clark despite the gold medal win feels like vindication for fans who felt the snub was personal. They see the NBC move as the market correcting a mistake made by the coaches. And this public sentiment only adds to the frustration within the Team USA camp. It is one thing to be criticized by trolls. It is another to be overruled by your broadcast partner. The disconnect between what basketball purists want and what the paying customer wants has never been wider. Coaches are screaming into a void trying to explain defensive rotations and legacy while the world just wants to see Caitlin shoot from the logo. We also have to look at the specific figures involved here, particularly Cheryl Reeve, who has been the focal point of this criticism. She wears two hats, one as the Team USA coach and one as the Minnesota Lynx coach. Many have argued that her dual role created a conflict of interest where she was protecting her own players and legacy rather than embracing the future. When Reeve made comments dismissing the idea that the snub was personal, fans didn't buy it. And now that NBC is effectively overruling her philosophy, it has to feel like a personal defeat. The explosion isn't just a moment of anger. It is the realization that the era of the coach-led dynasty is ending and the era of the player-led entertainment product is beginning. The old guard remembers a time when they had to beg for airtime, when they had to buy their own sneakers, and when nobody knew their names. So to see a rookie come in and have the red carpet rolled out by NBC triggers a deep-seated resentment that is difficult to overcome. But the cold, hard truth is that the WNBA was losing money for decades, subsidized by the NBA, and it wasn't until Clark arrived that the economics began to make sense on a massive scale. NBC isn't a charity. They are a business, and they are investing in the asset that yields the highest return. The Team USA coaches are fighting a war against capitalism, and that is a war you are never going to win. The unrivaled league founded by Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier adds another layer of complexity because they are trying to build a profitable off-season alternative. But reports suggest they are desperate to get Clark to sign because they know that without her their viewership ceiling is limited. It creates this awkward dynamic where the very players who are part of the system that snubbed her are now financially dependent on her participation in their new venture. If Clark decides to sit out or do something else, it hurts their bottom line. And this NBC announcement reinforces that she holds the cards. The explosion inside the Team USA camp is likely filled with fingers pointing in every direction, some blaming the media, some blaming the fans, and some perhaps quietly realizing they made a massive strategic error by alienating the biggest star in women's sports. They thought they could humble her, but instead they turned her into a martyr and a business titan. The league's upcoming season is going to be a fascinating study in human psychology because you will have a league that is financially thriving thanks to Clark while the people in charge of the teams are resentful of her success. How does NBC navigate that? They will likely do it by ignoring the coaches' complaints and focusing the cameras exactly where the money is. We might see a situation where the broadcast tells one story, the story of Caitlin Clark's rise, while the coaches try to tell another story on the court. And that friction is going to be television gold. This is why retention on these videos and games is so high. It's not just basketball. It's a soap opera with millions of dollars at stake. The explosion is just the latest episode. As we move toward the playoffs and the next Olympic cycle, the tension is only going to ramp up. The coaches can hold their closed-door meetings and vent their frustrations, but the signal is clear. The game has changed, the money has spoken, and the future belongs to those who can capture the audience's attention. Ultimately, this explosion after the NBC news is the sound of a paradigm shift, the sound of the old way of doing things dying. For decades, women's basketball was a niche community where respect was earned through tenure and silence. You waited your turn, you paid your dues, and eventually you got the spotlight. Caitlin Clark skipped the line, not because she asked to, but because the world demanded it. The coaches tried to enforce old rules on a new game and lost. The NBC announcement is simply the scoreboard lighting up to show the final result. The anger, the rumors of shouting matches, the leaked reports of frustration, it is all just the death rattle of the old guard. They can be mad, they can explode, and they can hold all the secret meetings they want. But as long as the cameras are owned by people who want ratings, Caitlin Clark is the captain now, and that is a reality no amount of chalkboard strategy can ever change.